Hey everyone, before we get to today's shows, I just want to ask you for your support. The UCAN Foundation has partnered with MoveOn.org to launch a petition that demands that Netflix and other reality shows put a disclaimer on the front of all unscripted shows. And that disclaimer says that all episodes are for entertainment purposes only, and any content can be edited, manipulated, and presented in any other way for storyline purposes. So please, if you can, check out the link in the description right here. Go add your name to support, and let's get this petition out to Netflix and start making some real change in the industry. Thank you for your support, and thank you for your signature. Now, let's enjoy the show.
The people who cast us knew what they were doing.
Yeah.
I can see immediately why you were cast. You can probably see why I was cast. And we might resent the way it worked, but that's because of the evil in the system, not because reality TV itself is essentially malign. I don't think it is. I think it could be a force for good. It's democratized television.
Are you going through life blind? This is Eyes Wide Open with Nick Thompson. On this podcast, we share knowledge and stories that build human connection while elevating stigmatized societal issues such as mental health, holistic wellness, culture, free speech, and more, all to ensure we show up in the world with our eyes wide open. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of Eyes Wide Open. Before we get started, I just want to remind you, again, please like, share, subscribe, leave a review. But I also want to thank all of you who have and all of you who are loyal listeners. The show's been growing. We've been doing some really good interviews lately. And all of these things help us get better interviews. They help us in the algorithm. They help get the word out. And they hopefully help more and more people go through life with their eyes wide open. But today's episode is a very special episode because I have Professor Tim Wilson, who is a really compelling and really interesting human being. He was also cast on season 2 of The Circle. Not only was he cast on it, but he was a finalist and a winner on the show. But guess what? Not treated like a human being. And it blows my mind that it's 2023. And I still have to say, every time I conduct one of these interviews or I go on an interview myself, I have to say, we're human beings. Everyone's a human being, and we deserve to have basic human rights, basic labor practices, basic representation. But this issue in reality TV is much bigger than I ever thought it was. It's much more systemic than I ever thought it was. And every time a new story or a new headline comes out, which they seem to be coming like a waterfall lately, it's just a pleasant reminder, I guess maybe an unpleasant reminder, that this is a completely unmanaged, unregulated, wild, wild west, and people are being completely neglected as human beings. So we're going to talk to Tim. We're going to learn a little bit about Tim. We're going to learn about how he ended up on The Circle, how he ended up winning The Circle, and everything that he's been through personally, professionally, and the impacts of reality TV on him. So I hope you hear his story and it helps you watch reality TV and think about how we view these shows with your eyes wide open. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's episode of Eyes Wide Open. My guest today is Professor Tim Wilson. Tim is a professor at Moscow State Pedagogic University. He's a writer, film director of 5 animated award-winning films, former, or as I say, recovering politician, and a finalist of season 2 of The Circle. Tim, welcome. Thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, you suggest I've done rather more than I realize I've done, but I still don't. I think it's a work in progress. I'm even writing as well. I started writing an autobiography, and I one day it will get produced. And I've written some novels. They won't get produced. They're just sort of
fan fiction, or for you?
Well, not fan fiction. They're just scurrilous. And I've gone back into the theatre, by the way.
Oh, you have?
Yeah, I've been. Last year I did. We have this wonderful form of theatre in Britain called pantomime, which is just pure filth, really. You stand on the front of the stage and you talk directly to the audience. It's so nice.
I kind of like it.
Yeah, it's wonderful. We use sort of fairy tales as a basic thing. Julie Andrews started her career doing that. She was an egg in Humpty Dumpty, and I was an old man in a thing called Dick Whittington, which has a lot of opportunity for double entendre.
Ah, okay.
I've got very good at keeping very straight faced when somebody is saying something to me, or when I'm saying something which is just um, completely over the top. I really enjoy it, and except the costume last year, the costumes were so heavy, and we had a whole troupe of dancers dancing around. I was terrified I was going to get run over on stage, and we had so little rehearsal and 3 shows a day. That is
How do you perform 3 shows a day?
it's like going to the gym.
So then I got to ask you, how do you go to the gym 3 times a day?
Well, I don't. I don't. I mean, God, and your voice, you can barely keep your voice going. And we had
Yeah.
COVID as well and train strikes. So at one point we had almost no one in the theatre because the train strike killed off the audience. But it's what pantomime is. What almost every single town and city have pantomimes in Britain for about a month over Christmas, and it's what keeps the theatre alive. And it's very traditional. It goes back to the mid-Victorian period. It's got nothing to do with the tradition of pantomime of performing without saying something. In fact, we say a great deal. It's the British understanding. It's the way the British made sense of commedia dell'arte. They just mixed it up with what we call music hall, what you would call vaudeville, what other people would just call pure filth, and put it on as family entertainment, and it's wonderful. And there are jokes which, of course, the small children won't get, and the adults titter along.
Those are the best.
And then there's a lot of slapstick, and I love slapstick. I really love it. I got hit a few times, which is great. And you have these incredibly fast costume changes.
I can
Uh,
imagine.
it,
I
it,
can
it, it,
imagine.
was, it was great fun, and I got a chance to do some of my accents. And in the second half of the show, I was the director of Love Island, which is a reality TV show.
How ironic.
I was supposed to play him I think as a Spaniard, and I thought, no, I can't do that. But I played him initially as a Greek, and then my voice started to go. So I think I ended up playing him as a Russian, and finally, I played him as an Albanian, which I rather enjoyed. I love Albania, I love Russia, I love Greece. So I felt all of those imitations were, I was punching up rather than punching down.
Always a good place to be.
And the thing I wanted to punch down about was, of course, reality TV. And I had a few quips about reality TV, about The Circle. There was a line there. Oh, I'm going to stay at home and watch repeats of The Circle. That's a television program that nobody watches, and I quite enjoyed that line.
It's all in the delivery, right?
It was all in the delivery. Yeah.
I have to ask you, because I ask all my guests this, and it's my favorite question to ask them. And considering right before we hopped on this call, and I forgot to put it in when I was introducing you, you spent time as a monk too. So we'll dive into that just for a few minutes. But before we do that, you're such a fascinating individual. And I told you before we started recording that as I was researching for the episode, I was blown away by all of your life experiences and how interesting and diverse they were. But when you were growing up, what did you want to be when you were growing up? How'd that change?
I wanted to be an animator, and I've become that in many ways. I saw my hero when I was 11 years old. I wrote to him. He got an Oscar. I wrote to him immediately, and he invited me up to. In fact, do you see Who Framed Roger Rabbit behind? You don't see it.
Yeah, I do see it. The blue jacket.
He was the animation director on that. He's a fellow called Richard Williams. He was simply wonderful, and he invited me up to his studio when I was 11, and we remained in touch. And I did bits and pieces for him and with him. And I think my work is very much derivative of his. He died about 2 years ago, but he was very much one of my mentors and one of my heroes. And I just think it's so lovely when children can meet their hero. And I got slightly thrown off the tracks as I was growing up. But
well, I got to meet one of my heroes a couple months ago, and the thing about heroes, they have a tendency to let you down. and I loved your story because yours followed through. Not only did he respond to your letter, but he invited you into his studio and he mentored you. Like, that's a wonderful story to hear.
Yeah, no, well, he wasn't the only one. I mean, when I went to university, I wrote to lots and lots of people I admired, and they all wrote back to me. And
Wow.
I shared a house with quite a famous poet who was mad. She was completely loopy. But we both had correspondence with one of the greatest actors in Britain. He was a fellow called John Gielgud, who was in a wonderful film called Arthur. He was the butler in Arthur, who came in a very pompous way, would deliver these sort of rather arch and rather naughty lines. And he was amazing. He didn't really discover film properly until he was much older, and then he did bit parts all over the place. And
Okay.
but he was astonishing, and I think he was very useful as well. Um, and I think of these people when I'm either performing or drawing, and I think, these people, that was my education. I had a very good academic education as well, but
Right.
my education as an animator was hands-on. My education as an actor was hands-on, and and it's really the acting and the animating that's taken over. And somebody in a school, I went into a school, and somebody rather sort of condescendingly said, "Oh, you draw for a hobby," and I said, "No, I teach for a hobby." Which I think is getting it in the right place. And so when I went on to reality TV, I think they hadn't fully realized I was very comfortable with cameras. So I knew how to deal with a camera. And I'm one of the I think I come to life a bit.
Yeah. Well, you're a performer.
And I moved away from performing, and I moved into directing and designing. So I understood how it worked. And there were
Mhm.
times in the circle when I was when I was on this show, I never volunteered to be on it. I never applied.
I
It
wanted
was
to ask, how did they find you and track you down? Because you were headhunted basically
Yeah,
for it.
everybody was. I mean, but the not everybody, but almost everybody. But I'd made a YouTube video called "How to Write a Good Essay." If you ever want to write, if you ever want to find me, or if you ever want to write a good essay, if you've got to do any academic work, you write "How to Write a Good Essay" in YouTube, and I pop up immediately, and it made me. It gave me that sort of YouTube presence. I think, I've got millions of followers
Yeah.
from millions of hits from that. And I think they thought that I would go on the show. I'd be the old fart who'd get knocked off quite quickly. And then they realised I was comfortable. I was
Right.
really comfortable. I don't know what it was like for you. And when I went into the circle and when I went onto the set, I just felt at home. And I thought, I've been avoiding going back to acting for so many years. And actually, this is something I feel very comfortable doing. And acting yourself is still acting, which I
Hmm.
think is something British Equity needs to get its head round.
Well, I think we could have a whole episode on that because I agree with you. You are 100% working, performing, whatever you want to call it, while you were on these shows for so many hours. In a quick elevator type pitch, what is the circle and how does it work and what happens to you when you're filming?
It's a sort of debased Big Brother, but you're kept in a single apartment. You have to interact with other people on the show through a television screen and a specially constructed social media format. You never see them. So a lot of the other people who you are talking to could well be catfishing. That was a word that I was introduced to. That means pretending to be somebody that you aren't. And I was myself because they thought that the more they learned about me, the more they realized that it wasn't very believable, and I was very happy with that. And because I've been an academic, and because I've listened to, I've read, I've digested people's writing. I believe I can tell when somebody is older, when somebody is younger, when somebody is male, when somebody is female, just by looking at the text. So I not only knew that people were fake, I could tell their gender.
Wow.
And I thought it was hilarious. There was one character who was a girl who was pretending to be her son, who was a bricklayer, a builder, and and not only did I know that the son was not real, but I also knew that he was his mother. And production was constantly asking me, "Oh yes, I've got to say." in these shows, there's a particular job called Voice of God. I don't know if did you have a Voice of God?
We did not have a voice. Well, we did. We did at some points, kind of, when you were in the pods, which is where you talk to each other through a wall. Every now and then, someone would come in and be like, "Stop talking about that. Sit up straight. Do
Yeah,
some.
yeah. Are you
Stop."
sure
Yeah,
you meant that? Are you
yeah.
sure you meant that? I mean, I just got on terribly well with my Voices of God, and they didn't correct very much of what I said. But I do remember once or twice they would prompt me to get rid of somebody, which we call blocking, constipation. And I always thought it'd be great fun when the Circle re-airs. It should be sponsored by Ducalax or something. You'll never get blocked with Ducalax. You can't air that, can you? Because that's advertising. But anyway, Ducalax when you've really got to go. Leave the Circle with a bomb and a splash. Uh, anyway, no, but they did because they had me up there doing this blocking conversation at about 3 o'clock in the morning when I was really tired. So one of the things that happens in all of these shows is your phone is taken away, your watch is taken away if I wore one, and you very quickly lose a sense of time. You lose a sense of what hour it is. You lose a sense of how many days you've been there. I was there. I was incarcerated for about a month. We had 1 day a week off, but that day we were still kept in the flat.
How long did this go on for?
A month. A month.
So you were stuck in a house
For a
by
month.
yourself for a
Yep.
month.
Except it wasn't really by myself. I had runners coming in all the time. I had a psychiatrist coming in every time, sort of teasing more information out of me. The Voice of God.
Do you think that the psychologists were teasing information out of you to give back to production?
100%. Yes.
That's why I have concerns, and our director of mental health services at the UCAN Foundation, Dr. Isabel Morley, who's a psychologist and couples therapist, also has concerns that these are ethical issues at some point.
Big ethical issues, because what happens to you on these programs, particularly the longer you're sort of caught up in them, the longer you're trapped in them, imprisoned in them, the more you lose agency. And your agency is your ability to make decisions. So what happens is it's a teacher trick that you learn very early on when you're a teacher, that if you want control in your classroom, if you don't want your children to rebel, you walk in and you tell them to do something that they're automatically going to do. And they do it, and they feel that they're being commanded to do it. They're being actually, you're terrified they won't do it. Stand up, sit down, and put your hand up, and they'll all do it. So the initial attempt to get rid of your agency is to get you to do things that you would ordinarily do, like eat. And then you find they're encouraging you to eat at different times, or they're questioning what you're eating. You're also controlled about bathroom breaks, I think you would say in the States. We would just talk about the loo, which is incomprehensible when you're in the States.
When I visited England, I have a good friend who lives in Harrogate, England.
We should all have good friends in Harrogate.
I love it over
Wonderful.
there. So we were getting ready to go out to dinner, and I'm like, okay, before we go, I have to use the bathroom. And she lived here for a while, so she just forgot. So I come back down, and they're sitting down, and they've started a TV show. And I asked, I'm like, what? I thought we were going. They're like, oh, we thought you were taking a bath. And I was like, no. They're like, oh, we just saved the toilet. Like, I'm going to go use the toilet before we leave. So then we got all dressed up again and ended up going out to dinner. But anyway, yeah. So the bathroom breaks you can request them.
Yeah, they wanted me to be extremely specific because they had a camera in the loo.
What?
They had a camera in the loo which recorded us having a shower in the morning, which I felt
is that legal?
Intimate. Well, it was focused on our head, but nevertheless, it was a bit sort of uncomfortable, and they had particular shots of us sort of standing at the bathroom mirror talking it was to try and get different views, and they also had a camera which, if you left the bathroom door open, would look at you from behind, and you get your reflection, all that sort of stuff. In order for the camera to crank out of view, or to crank so it's looking upwards, that required quite a lot of effort, and there was another movement for the camera, I think, which was much easier. So you had to indicate what you were going to do in the bathroom. And I thought, there's no way I'm going to be giving you medical details. So I'm afraid I made it all into a sort of political joke.
This is so abrasive.
For me, a serious dump was a Farage. Mr. Farage ran a thing that produced Brexit, and I tried very hard in my small political career to get rid of Farage, and I found it very entertaining. In fact, it did make the final cut. I think I made some comment about this is worth a Farage, or I feel so nervous. I go and have a Farage immediately, or something like that. Anyway, Farage now I hope will enter the dictionary as a fecal moment, and the alternative was a Widdicombe. Now, Anne Widdicombe is an extraordinarily bumptious lady who's also very keen on Brexit. And I thought, Widdicombe, it just sounds like what it is, doesn't it? A quick Widdicombe, and then I'll be out. But sometimes, I'm afraid, they'd say, "Oh, that was very fast." I said, "Yes, it was just a lot of Theresa May." Theresa May was one of our worst prime ministers, just hot air. So I enjoyed that, but it took me a few minutes to work out, what I was going to say, because there was no way I was going to be medical.
Did you feel? I can't believe you were there a month. I'm trying to wrap my head about
all of this ramping up continues. So once they've got you obedient and compliant, then they just keep. Then they can make suggestions like, surely you wanted to block Brooke. Surely you said you wanted, and at 3:00 in the morning you don't remember. And and the fans say, oh, we liked Professor Tim, but we didn't like it when you blocked your best friend. Why did you do that? And I think, I have no idea why I did that. I didn't want to do that. I was clearly, and I remember the conversations. I remember the prompting, and clearly they'd got it in mind that that's what they were going to push me into doing. And I remember at one point I had to block somebody, and I was absolutely refusing to do it. And I said, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to block bum, 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 Tim. And the entire production stopped for about 2 hours, and we were left in this little room, two of us on either side of a room split by a wall so we couldn't see each other.
Yeah.
With alcohol.
Well, there's always alcohol.
We were left for 2 hours. There was a lot of alcohol in those meetings. So there's alcohol late at night and voices from God. I mean, why are you not going to be persuaded to do things you don't really want to do? At that point, you just want to go to bed. And I wanted to get my cat and take my cat back to bed and just cuddle up for the night.
How many hours a day were you guys being recorded, do you think?
Well, Brooke, this wonderful girl who I eventually blocked, was a cook.
Okay.
She cooked. And she had a weighing scales which she brought in with her, which had a timer on it, and nobody realized. And so she was able to see what the time was. And she insisted that we were working until 3:30, 4:00 in the morning. And then they discovered that she had a time, and they took it away. I know that having been a monk, I'm quite good at waking up early in the morning. So I would wake up early. And they wouldn't let me get out of bed, and I certainly had time to go through the entire song sheet of great musicals. I did a musical a day.
Did you guys get windows or sunlight or anything?
There were windows, but we were told to keep away from the windows. Of course, there were real windows. I mean, it was a real block of flats, and they were worried that that we could see fans outside because it was going out in almost real time.
It was. I didn't know that.
Yeah. This wasn't. I think some of the episodes went out literally in real time, but I think the majority went out. We were filmed and then we were edited, and it was out the following day. So it was.
Holy cow!
It was very, very intense, which means, of course, when they took decisions that this conversation wasn't very relevant. And then when it became relevant later, they couldn't go back. So I had one great friendship with a fellow called Si, who was a farmer. And I'd had a background farming when I was a child. So we had conversations about Massey Ferguson tractors and castrating animals. And maybe it was a little niche, but we had quite a lot of these conversations. None of them went out.
Wow.
And when he was blocked by me, he was asked, who would you like to go and see? And he said, I want to see Tim. And they said, no, surely you want to see this girl or you want to see that girl. And he said, no, I want to see Tim. And eventually he came to see me, but the audience couldn't work out why he wanted to see me, because they'd not had any evidence of any relationship between us, because the producers had decided it was too niche. So it made no sense. It made no sense.
That's something I think, and this is why we have a petition, right? Which we're working with moveon.org to petition to have a disclaimer put at the beginning of every reality TV episode indicating that these are highly edited for entertainment purposes and that what you're seeing is not a representation of reality. And I think when people watch these shows, I don't know, some people square the circle, but some people watch them and they're like, oh, well, this didn't seem right. Or they don't stop and take the moment to reflect on maybe what I'm seeing here isn't in context or isn't in the order of events that happened.
When you start talking to people, because I was trying to take you're trying to take legal action. I'm trying to take political action. I want serious political changes.
And I'm trying to take political action too, just to let you know that.
We need to be working together, because I don't know how much further I can take this in the UK, because our present government is so hostile to the idea of any form of change. They've made their modest change, but in fact what they've done is to give more power to production. So I think, number one, yes, we need to establish very clearly that what you've got is an edited version of reality. Even if you've got something like Big Brother, where there's cameras on you all the time, you're still making a choice about which camera you're showing to the audience, and that in itself tells a story.
Exactly.
You've got the wonderful. Have you seen the wonderful Hitchcock thing? Hitchcock talks about the MacGuffin.
Oh yeah, I love Hitchcock.
The MacGuffin is what we are involved in. That's what we are as contestants in a game. The game is the MacGuffin. No one's interested in the game. The game is the excuse to keep these people involved in some sort of activity while they're being observed and exploited. That's one side. The other thing that Hitchcock said, he said, you take a photograph, you take a shot. You got a shot of a man. It's a shot of him, and then he smiles. And in between those two shots, in between those two moments, from the shot of the man to the shot of the smile, you can put a picture of a baby. You think, nice man. But if instead of the baby, you put a picture of a girl in a bikini, you think, dirty old man.
That's so interesting and true.
Now, the point is, the production company is in charge of which shots you see. So the production is always telling a story. It's never reality. It's always being filtered through the lens.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you are being you, or being me, you have to be aware that your performance is going to be transmitted through the lens. Now, if you're giving so much that the lens can't look away from you, you're in a little bit more control. If you're initiating conversations, you're very weak. If you're responding to conversations, which is the Hitchcock situation, the camera just cannot. They cannot avoid that. And I realized in the circle I was very comfortable responding. And I was very comfortable deadpanning to somebody. Somebody said, "Oh, what's a MILF?" And I said, "Did I know what a MILF was? I might have done at some point, but once I realized this was a comic moment, I thought I just have to play along." And I could sort of see it being edited at the same time. Now, yeah, I didn't know what a MILF was, but I knew that it was a dirty word. And I knew once they'd started on that one, they were going to do others, and they did. And I just
you know what's interesting about that though, from And I didn't realize how quick yours was edited and put out. So ours took 8, 9, 10 months to come out.
Yep. And then you've got that period of anxiety.
Oh my gosh, you have no idea the toll that took.
Right at the beginning of the reality TV story, kill themselves because they're so anxious about how they're going to be portrayed in that edit.
Yeah. Well, and that's the whole thing is I remember when I read the contract and there's a section in the contract that says they can misfame you, edit out of order, blah, blah, blah. I remember thinking, I don't have to worry about that. I'm just going to be me and I don't do anything, I act with integrity. I don't do anything outside of my values. I'll be fine. But then I've imagined, and I didn't get a bad edit. There's things that are out of context, but I've talked to so many people that did get a villain edit or did get a bad edit, or the way that they edited even my relationship and my ex-wife. It was there's no context. So at the very best case scenario, you're missing real context, and context matters.
Well, I absolutely. I mean, I got a spectacular edit. I don't think there's almost anything in the show that that I personally wouldn't have put there out of choice.
Right.
I got such a good edit. I enjoyed the show enormously. I was very, very tired.
You enjoyed the experience?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah, no. I'm different to a lot of people who complain. A lot of people complain because they feel they've had a bad edit, which they have, because they feel things have been out of context. And in fact, almost all my friends, when I talk to them or when I get them to talk to journalists or stuff, the whole thing goes awry because they start talking about their edit.
Mm-hmm.
You think, no, that's not really that's important, but it's
that's
not
part of it.
It's not the primary. This explains in some ways. This is like the icing on the cake, which explains why they're upset. This is what they can see, but if you start digging underneath it, what they're really upset by is the loss of agency.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. And
it's difficult to articulate. But it happens to all of us. So I had a really good edit. You had a relatively good edit, but we both lost agency.
And I think that's where I get fired up and why I wanted to be part of the UCAN Foundation was you're a wonderful advocate and becoming a friend. I think it's so interesting to me because it took me so long after everything. So we filmed in 2021, April, May, and June. So 2.5 years. But then the show came out last year, right? And then After the Altar, which is a follow-up 3 episodes, came out last fall. Then I got divorced, which leaked to TMZ before I told my family. So that was an incredibly stressful situation. A couple months later, I got publicly slandered and defamed. And then I lost my job. And then I was heading into an interview with the same psychologist I mentioned earlier, Dr. Isabel Morley, who was writing a piece for psychologytoday.com on the impacts of reality TV on people. So I did the interview with Dr. Isabel, and it was over 2 days, I think, and we did a couple hours each day. And we went from the moment they reached out to me on LinkedIn, where they asked me if I was interested, all the way up to where I was at that moment. And that was the first time that I had done that, because you're just in the fire hose is coming. You're also in a pressure cooker. I was trying to make my marriage work. I was trying to, keep my career afloat that I'd worked so hard for. I was battling, I've suffered from depression for most of my life. And I was battling all of this stuff with that undertone, but also this deep despair of the end of my relationship and the end of my marriage. And what I don't think people understand, and this is we had different shows, right? Totally different. But what people don't understand, just because it happened on TV doesn't mean that it wasn't real.
Absolutely.
And I lost that. I'm losing a marriage and a relationship. I didn't just lose that. I lost this life with a new family, right? I had become very close with her family. She was becoming close with mine. And we had this entire life that we had started integrating together. And no matter how hard we tried, we just couldn't get it right. And there was this undertone of the show in everything, right? And it's the undertone of what do we do after they're not telling us what to do all the time once we get married, right? How do we explain what we went through together and why we're married, like to friends and family and all these people that, you know, you disappear for a couple of weeks, you come, we're going through all this without any support and any real support. Some platitudes thrown around, sure, I'll give them that.
The
And
platitude's pretty awful. Yeah.
yeah, and it was hard for us to even find a couples therapist on our own because it was COVID and therapists were working 10 hours a day. And God bless them for doing that because people needed it. But we were just going through this. And when I finally got to that interview with Dr. Isabel and I sat there, it was December 22nd, 2022. And I hung up with her and it all hit me. And I said, this is the worst day of my life because I'm feeling everything going in. And I went in with such good intentions and I didn't think about, I mean, I didn't disagree with like Jeremy's lawsuit, the lack of food and water, but I was like, I can't worry about that right now. I'm trying to fix my marriage, you know. But when I sat there and I didn't have a job and I didn't have a marriage and it was all done in the public eye, and I really had to reflect on what this was, I realized how horrible it was. And I realized that it had taken me to a place that I hadn't been in a very long time, a place of despair, a place of depression, a place of I don't know if I want to be here anymore.
It's summed up by a lack of agency.
It is. And I felt like everything for a year and a half just happened to me and I wasn't in any control of my life.
And the lies which surround that, which the production throw at you and throw at the media about you, which is that, oh, you can't deal with fame. You can't deal with the loss of fame or the acquisition of, and that is rubbish.
It's so stupid.
But that is such a good get out clause for them.
Oh, it is. But and it wasn't even that's the thing, it wasn't that. It was I had all this loss. I was losing everything. I had worked so hard. I worked so hard to get my career where it was.
You're no longer in control of it, and it just goes through your fingers. Effectively, I lost my job because I couldn't go back to my job after being exposed so much on the show,
On the world stage.
And they exposed things about me which I didn't agree to.
Do you want to share some of those, or would you prefer not to?
Well, there's no need to at this moment, but you know, they define me as gay, which I mean, I certainly don't deny it, but it's not what defines me. And teaching in a university in Russia where there were very, very harsh laws coming out, which have only got harsher, it put me at risk.
That is a blatant disregard for your safety and a blatant disregard for your career, a blatant disregard for your personal wellness, like your partner and your life. And it's just,
well, my partner is vulnerable, and they made sure that he was on the show as well, although you know that wasn't the agreement. And
how did they get him on the show?
Because they spoke to him on the telephone every single day.
Did you know that was happening?
No, I knew that he was going to get psychological support, but I certainly didn't know that. I was horrified. That sort of pressure. I mean, it's bad enough if it's going on to me, to go on to other members of my family. It's unacceptable. But
without your knowledge,
without my knowledge, and that's part of the deal. I mean, the other thing they did, I had quite a nice little niche market for doing titles and little inserts for BBC shows. And effectively, they stopped me doing that because
the animations.
Yeah, I have finally started doing them again.
Did they pull the we contractually own you for X amount of days, months, years?
It was never as clear as that. And the best I could say is it was a form of ghosting. and they called around. It also went down to the thing of sort of, I thought, well, if I'm not going to go back to my university, I ought to do theatre properly, and I need an agent. And they said, oh, we'll be your agent. And I said, well, no, I need a real agent. And somebody on the show introduced me. And after a while, it became quite clear that they had to get permission from the company. And then quietly, it all became impossible. And it wasn't the only time it happened. It happened a few times, and I just thought, this is a nightmare.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
And you just think, how I have no control,
None.
and because I can write and because I can articulate things. Various newspapers, I think, when the third series was coming out, asked me for interviews, and one or two of them, I think, asked me for opinion pieces, which I wrote. I don't think I've ever actually. I don't think I've ever actually put in my invoice, so I've never been paid for them. But
You wrote from a passionate place.
but I wrote and I said that this is 18 months of sheer hell. It was worse than being held at gunpoint, which has happened to me on 3 occasions. So I know exactly what I'm talking about. And then shortly after that, I hemorrhaged badly. I was whipped into hospital, and even in hospital, the nurse who was standing next to me, just as the doctor was about to go in to look at my colon, um, the nurse leant over and said, "Weren't you on the circle?" And the doctor said, "That's just my finger." And it's funny, but it's a bit intrusive. And the next thing I knew, I had the newspapers calling me, and under British law, they can't write anything and they can't write anything medical unless I agree. And then and then I thought I should contact the production company. I did, and the next day, the newspapers stopped calling me, and they said they weren't allowed to write anything about me.
And that is how these production companies control the media.
But you don't know. So it's, as I say, ghosting is really the best description I can give. I don't know if I've said too much even now, but ghosting is the best description that you can give about this. I had conversations with the production company because I think they thought I was being too publicly critical, and they offered me a job as a producer. And because I'd said that that the show had become cruel and nasty. I think the show that I was in became cruel and nasty, and it broke its own rules halfway through the show, and it became very vicious, very, very vicious. Um, and but I saw through a lot of that. I didn't want to see what I didn't want to see, and and as I say, I enjoyed the show and I enjoyed the filming, and I would do in a way I'd do that again, but I wouldn't put myself through that position where I was so vulnerable again. But I would certainly do something with cameras and television. Um, but I wouldn't want the aftermath, and the aftermath, I think, is about a lack of agency. We're denied agents, we're denied union representation, we're denied actually being treated as real workers. There was an investigation that took place just after I came out of the show, and it wasn't really on my radar enough. And there were two TV shows in Britain. One was called Jeremy Kyle, which was quite a vicious thing, and the other one was called Love Island, and various people died, including the presenter. And so the government assembled a committee, the Digital Culture, Media and Sport Committee, and it took hearings from. It was supposed to take hearings from across the industry. Now, what it did was to take hearings from uh, production and from 4 people who had just been on the shows. So 2 of them were very, very warm towards the show, and 2 of them, I think, have been on the Jeremy Kyle, not so warm. And then because Boris Johnson called an election, all the committees stop. And it's then down to the committee chair to reconvene, and he decided not to. And yet, at the same time, while round about that point, I was writing letters, and I was being sort of fobbed off with this and fobbed off with that, and I've been on a complete merry-go-round for 3 years politically, um, and
And
on the
getting nowhere. I'm sure you were getting
getting nowhere.
absolutely
And
nowhere.
on the basis of the testimony from production, the decision was to give an organization called Ofcom uh, sort of control of a new rule, which would give production companies 18 months control of people who've been on reality TV, which which is the worst of all possible
Isn't
worlds.
that the opposite of what's supposed to happen there?
Yeah, what they wanted to do was to make sure that production paid for psychiatric help. The psychiatric help I got after the show, I was telephoned for a year or so after the show, and part of that involved a sort of tick box exercise. I enjoyed the chats, and I liked the person who was doing it. But the point about psychologist or psychologist is, what exactly is the qualification? Because it's very vague. It's a very vague term. And the psychologist would go through it. Have you had any suicidal thoughts? And the last time we had this, I said yes. And she then went further down the list, and nothing was ever done. Also, I telephoned their helpline. I wasn't the only one. Someone else telephoned the helpline, and was told, "Oh, you're not employed by the company, therefore we don't represent you." And thankfully, this person telephoned me. I talked them down, but when I telephoned them, I was left on hold for 10 days. They never did ask me why I telephoned. Never. So what level of despair was I in to call them late at night, I think it was. And we had this conversation about whether or not I was properly employed. And that is the level of, I mean, the company apologized to me, of course, later on. But so what? They never asked me why I called in the first place.
Because they don't care.
No. And the apology, I suppose they thought, well, he's still here.
They're checking a box with those things because they have to, or they feel they have to.
What happened to me? I had quite severe cancer, a T3. I'm going through scans at the moment, so I'm a little bit jittery. Anyway, so I thought I was going to die, and I thought that it was and when the consultant removed my tumor, which he said was like a carrot, I call it George, and when the consultant removed George, he said, "Oh, it's about 18 months old," and I went back in my mind to that article I'd written for the Independent. I thought, there it is in black and white. It's not a legal document, but it's an anecdotal document. I had a cancer growing inside me, which was about 18 months old, during a time that I said was 18 months of sheer hell, worse than being held at gunpoint.
Jeez.
I mean, I think that speaks for itself. And it's about the loss of agency. And it's, yes, people have bad edits. Yes, it's not reality. And yes, we should have some sort of health warning in front of these programs so that people watching are being seduced into this Milgram fest into this Stanford prison, Zimbardo, or whatever all
Stanford
these
prison experiment. Yeah.
Yeah, all these experiments, which are lethal, and they're participating in this as if they're watching a gladiatorial combat, and they don't want anyone to win. They're not interested in winners.
No.
It's like the X Factor or Britain's Got Talent or America's Got Talent. They're not interested in the talent. They're interested in the disasters. That's why you have the bum, 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 bum. You don't have the bum, 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 bum to see who wins. You're looking to see who's going to cry when they lose.
Yeah. And the drama that all leads into all of these moments. Yeah. They're there for the train wrecks. They're there for the messy. And I just had a reporter reach out to me through Dr. Isabel. Again, she's, I guess, sort of the co-star of this episode. I've talked about her a lot. Someone's doing a story on the impacts of trauma on how people view reality TV, that it could actually be a trauma response. And I haven't actually like said that before, but I've thought that.
The audience is damaged.
Yeah.
And they can't get enough, and it's like a drug, and it's really bad. I think I think it's hypnotic and compelling, and one of the reasons why I was cast, I think, was because I'd never watched any reality TV.
I hadn't either. I think that was part of why I was, but for a different reason. I think it was because I had a nice job, I had a condo, I had my shit together, and I think they wanted to make sure they had enough people that had their shit together so that they could get a love story out of it.
Yep.
And I haven't watched the new season. The new season just came out of my show, and people are like, this is ridiculous. Like, they don't even want to watch anymore because it's just so escalating. The drama just escalates.
And in the case of The Circle, they put in these nasty twists. Well, if you cast well enough, you don't need the nasty twists. The excuse for reality TV is if you've got a writer's strike, you're going to have more reality TV because you don't need a writer. In fact, you do need a writer because the writer sits behind and scribbles what they think is going to happen, and then you're manipulated into making sure that
into
does
their
happen.
storyline.
So you wonder where's the writer in this? Well, the writer's up in the gallery. But in principle, the only people who don't know what they're going to say, the only people who don't know that they've got a script, are the players, are the performers.
Yep.
And so put in the right environment with the right characters, we will produce drama because we've been very well produced, very well cast. But what happens now is, I think, instead of looking for characters who are going to spark off each other, the production companies look for stereotypes who are going to fit a particular mold, who they think are then going to
100% agree with that. I can't say for certain because I obviously didn't experience that side of it, but I 100% believe that is what's going on. And it's not just, it's with all of these shows.
All of them fall into a particular pattern, and you have to go back to the Milgram thing, and the Milgram thing is acknowledged. If you go back to the history of this of this medium, it's there right at the beginning with the first modern reality TV show. But reality TV can go back further than that. You can take it all the way back to the.
You can take it back to the 80s.
No, you can take it back earlier than that, to the 60s, to game shows, to
talk shows.
We had a thing called Saturday Night, Sunday Night at the London Palladium, and it would have a moment where contestants were brought onto the stage to play a game. That is reality TV, because reality TV is the democratization of television. You sit and watch it, and you can be on it, and that's the lovely thing. So I think reality TV can make great drama. I think reality TV can democratize television, but reality TV also allows for control by production, which is out of control, and our government, the British government, has actually endorsed that and made it worse.
And ours here hasn't even looked at it with any concern whatsoever until recently.
Well, what you have to be really careful about is that you're not going to end up in a situation that we've ended up in, where it's even worse, and you can't pull back from it because they say, oh, well, the people who should modify this document are Ofcom, and
always an excuse.
And they go round in a circle, and each blames the other.
And they rally people behind them, and then it's just nothing happens.
And of course, I'm very much aware that when I send off one of these letters, they know who's written it, they know who I am, and they're determined that I won't get to get the photo opportunity of sitting next to the Secretary of State. They're determined that won't happen, because that would change things significantly, I think.
I think it would too. I know I've got some stuff. Maybe by the time this has come out, it's been, I guess, detailed. But there's a lot of change that needs to happen, and I think we can produce reality TV ethically and within. Whether that comes from unionization of cast members, whether that comes from legal regulation, whether that comes from regulatory boards, whether that comes from all of us saying we're done with this. I think it needs to happen. And I think if we're going to continue to do this and act like we're in the Squid Games or the Hunger Games, and that's what this is at this point, the stuff I was telling you before we came on today, sexual assault because someone wasn't allowed to leave. This it like what is it going to take for people to wake up, open their eyes, and say enough? We are not doing this to human beings for the entertainment of other human beings and then paying them with followers on Instagram and TikTok.
Yep.
We're not
Yeah.
doing that. That is not how society functions. And why does, let me ask this. I have to do something on this. I don't know what yet, but why does every single reality show have a villain? Because it's scripted that way.
It doesn't need to. It doesn't need to.
It doesn't need to. There will be natural, quote, villains, but there will also be engaging, relatable conversations, relationships, friendships, group dynamics.
But more than that, villains can be saved even in real life. I'm perfectly happy to imagine that Mr. Putin is a nice man. Well, he was. I mean, he didn't seem very nice when I shook his hand, but I can see that he could be rehabilitated somewhere.
Well, hey, we've rehabilitated some people in this country that should be in prison. So anything's possible. The media gets behind it. There we go.
Yeah, but people, I think people are fundamentally good, and but reality TV wants to see people in these sort of black and white and very, very tribal, and I think we need to get beyond that. I think we need to see that people have got layers of
nuance.
Nuance, yeah, and fundamentally, everybody is huggable and lovable. I think,
and
really.
I agree with you. I think there's good in everyone. You just got to find it, and it's almost like, you gotta check yourself before you jump on these people as a viewer, because you haven't lived this situation. And I have never talked. I mean, I've talked to some people on reality shows that are like, yeah, that wasn't a good person, or that person isn't my kind of person. But that doesn't mean they're a villain. That means they've got their own people. And I listen. I had issues with some people on my show, and I let them be them, and if them being themselves isn't for me, I just don't deal with it. I don't associate. That's our decision as a human being. But to throw hate at people because of what you see on TV that you're perceiving as reality, it's so damaging, and it gives so much additional trauma to people, and people are spilling their trauma all over the internet, and it just makes me.
Oh, absolutely.
It breaks my heart.
I have a YouTube channel, and what I try and do is cut through this tribalism, but it's so difficult sometimes. And people will say, "Oh, you're being inconsistent." I'm not being inconsistent. I'm trying to look at more than one view, and I think we've got two hands, and I can quite happily say I believe fundamentally in this with this hand, and I believe fundamentally in that with the other hand.
People are nuanced.
Yeah. My background academically is in theology, um, and I can argue until the cows come home for two sides of exactly the same issue. I don't see any problem with that.
It's also critical thinking.
It's critical thinking. It's
Yeah.
critical thinking, and I teach a lot of small children debating skills, and we say, oh, we're going to do this debate. You've got 5 minutes to work out a decent argument. But I don't believe in this. I say, well, that's why you're doing this side.
Oh my gosh, I can debate any side, most sides, I should say, without actually believing it. It's so good.
It's a courtesy and a pleasantry, and it's something which is very nice to have. But we need that debate, and that's what we lack in politics. I think it's also what we lack in ordinary society. It's what television. It's what actually reality TV could give us. It could give us that debate, rather than the tribalism and the I believe. I don't care what you believe, really. And
Right.
I just want to hear that debate, and I want to hear that sort of reasoned encounter.
Yeah.
And I also want to hear the points at which you agree with somebody, because that's fun.
It is. It definitely is. I want to ask you, one last question here, and then I'm going to give you an opportunity to ask me anything that you want to ask. But what would you like to see changed? Maybe top couple things, three things, do three things. Top three things you would like to see changed in reality TV production.
Oh, very easy. The unions must get involved, because because this is about performance, and so in Britain, the equity union, which we stole from you in the 1930s, very late on. You had it much before we had it. We had a thing called the Variety Artists Federation, the Musical Variety Artists Federation, or something like that. And they had a principle that anybody who was performing had a right to representation. And equity, in the States and here, takes a view that it guards the profession. It acts as the doorkeeper to the profession. Well, that's very good and very necessary as well. But we also need to be caring for those people who are performing in any situation. And reality TV is very much about people who are performing. And why should you protect them? Because they are, and they have been right the way back to the beginning of the 20th century. They can be exploited by production. So that needs to be an option. People may say, I don't wish to be unionized. I don't wish to be involved in that. That's fine. That's their choice. But the offer must be there. And equity in Britain doesn't seem to be very interested. It is participating in an academic review at the moment, which I think began at the beginning of October. And I've spoken to the universities who are doing this. They called me. I'm delighted that we've spoken. And equity is going to be observing that review. But that's about as far as they'll go. When I spoke to the leader of equity in Britain, he was extremely dismissive. And he said, "Well, you're not professional. You're only playing yourself," and all that sort of rubbish. And I just think, and he wouldn't take the matter any further, no matter how much I pushed, and I can push. So that's number one. So I think unionization is essential. I also think it's essential that people who are on reality TV have independent and external representation by agents. Now that's more difficult to arrange. It's not about them having agents who are going to represent them afterwards. It's about knowing that there's somebody who's not invested in the show who has their back.
And take away the power that the shows have to completely control you after.
I mean, I've thought about this a lot because the problem is the cheap approach for production companies is to have a list of cheap agents that they can just throw at the people that they've selected.
Right.
Do you have an agent? No. Oh, well, here's an agent for you. And you think, oh my goodness, how lovely, I've got management.
That management does not have your best interests.
I think this is where an organization like UCAN could come in. This is something, if production companies were to work with UCAN, I would love to see a similar organization develop in the UK. I would like to spearhead it, frankly. I think what you're doing is spectacular and exactly what we should be doing here. That may well be the answer to that part of the equation. Then I think we need to dump the idea that psychiatry solves all problems. Psychiatry is a very important part of the medical care that must be given simply because you're employed. And it's part of. I think it's part of that of that medical insurance. And I think we should stop thinking that the psychiatrist is part of the company, and it should instead be a completely independent medical insurance that is provided by the company for a protracted period of time. And 18 months is not enough.
I've been saying that's, I think, my number one, what I want right now, because I think we can do it right now. I think there's obviously work to build a union, all of that stuff. But if we could get independent mental health professionals that they pay, and maybe, we have I think we're up to 500 mental health professionals in the United States that have joined the UCAN network. We could pair people in almost every single state with an independent mental health counselor, where maybe they pay the foundation pays the therapist, and it's independent.
And even independent counsellors being observers in the production companies. We have to
Absolutely.
get away. We have to get away from everything else. But also we need medical help in production itself, broader medical help, because
Yeah.
you don't know what can happen, and that has to be part of that package. Essentially, it comes down to one single thing: people who are employed in reality TV need to be recognized as employees and need to be treated as top-rate employees, which means they need to be paid.
Mm-hmm.
When this committee hearing was being conducted in the UK in Parliament, the company, the television channel, Channel 4, the bosses of the channel were there, and they refused absolutely to use the term participant. They insisted on the term contestant. Why? Because it demeans us, because it belittles us, because and when I
Because
was
then you're
talking,
competing for something.
now, when I was talking to the people who produced the show, and they were trying to get me to be a producer, they kept saying again and again, "But did you enjoy it? Did you enjoy? But you enjoyed it, didn't you?" And I thought, well, I would say yes, I did enjoy it, but then I suddenly realised if I say that, I'm playing into their hands.
And they can discredit you.
I was doing it as fun. Well, I do lots of things as fun. I enjoy my work in the theatre, but I get paid. I enjoy my work as an artist, but I get paid. I enjoy my work when I write, but I get paid. I enjoy my work in the university, but I get paid. Actually, that's not true. I've never been paid properly by Russia. But in any other situation, I get paid even if I enjoy it. Even if I were a prostitute, I would expect money.
Mm-hmm.
And and to be told, oh, you're enjoying it, therefore you're not being paid. The only thing treated, the only thing professionally that you get that is like reality TV is jury service.
I think you might make more during jury service here in the States than you do in reality
Really?
TV.
No, I'm so disappointed with the UK on so many levels, but there we are. Um, I will come over and be the revival of Robin Williams.
There you go. That would be great. I
There
love
we
Robin Williams. I
I
absolutely
love
love him.
Robin Williams as well.
So let me give you the chance to ask me a question before we finish up here. I know we've talked quite a few times now, but
Yeah.
yeah, if there's anything you want to know about me or
No, what I want to know is do you have a vision of the future for yourself? Not just for UCAN. UCAN I know, and I think is splendid. And you and Jeremy need to get as much help as possible to get that off the ground. It is off the ground, but it needs a version over here.
yeah.
But equally, I mean, what about you?
That is a really hard question. Wasn't prepared for that. What?
Sorry.
And no. I'll be real with you. I've recently started thinking about that, where I'm like, I have been in this world for 2.5 years. And last year, when I mentioned earlier that I had kind of hit rock bottom, I decided I was leaving this world. I went and made an effort I turned off all my notifications on social media. I do it on my time. I post when I want. I post when I want. I don't care what people think about me, but I did start to feel the impacts of all the negativity. And so when I decided to start UCAN with Jeremy and come back, and it was his idea, I just brought my flavor of adding other types of services to it. And being, let me tell you, being this kind of the initial spokesperson for it, for lack of a better word, man, I never knew trying to help people was so polarizing, was so triggering for people. But lately I've been thinking to myself, who am I? Like my identity is not reality TV. It's not UCAN Foundation. It's not my job. It's who do I show up as in the world? And I will say, I think me working on UCAN and trying to organize reality cast members and taking the steps that I've taken here to do that. That's much more on brand, for lack of a better word, for me, because I have been in politics. I have been organizing since 2008. I follow politics like it's my job. I love it. And I want change. And so after 2020 election here, I batted for Bernie twice, and the second time the loss and the way he took it, he didn't even take it on the chin. He just laid down, and he had a whole movement that I felt like he abandoned. And I just reminded myself right there, nothing's going to happen through electoral politics. Everything's going to happen from organizing and saying no. And so that kind of became my stance on things. And now being able to see all these pieces of my identity kind of merge together into the organizing, the foundation, the helping other people, the podcast, right, where I'm talking about very important societal issues, being vocal and open and sharing, mental health advice, mental health content, working with people who are way smarter at it than I am, and having them share their stories. I think my identity of who I'm going to be moving forward is starting to form, and I don't have it completely formed, but I'm starting to see and think to myself, like, where do I want to be in a year? Where do I want to be in 2 years? Like me, when am I going to focus on building the life that I want that is for me? And I think I'm at this point now where I don't have the answer to that, but I know I need to find the answer to that.
But I think you're doing it. That's what you. I think you've actually found your calling.
Which is so funny because I would have never in a million years. When I said this to my friend yesterday, when I was growing up, I wanted to be a WWE wrestler. I wanted to be Hulk. I wanted to be Hulk Hogan or the Macho Man or the Ultimate Warrior, right? Or Jake the Snake. And by the way, Jake the Snake followed me on Instagram, and that was the biggest. That was the biggest funny thing. Granted, I followed him first, but I just never in a million years imagined that this would be my life. But at the same time, I'm not surprised, because when something's wrong, I can't not do something.
Exactly. But that's your political training, and we've both had that. And I don't think it stops really at reality TV. I think there's two other areas that we need to be looking at. We need to be looking at the music industry. We need to be looking at what I suppose we call cheap sofa television, the breakfast television, all that sort of stuff, which is equally exploitative, and it's all about the control of production.
It is. It really is.
These talentless individuals who are basically bureaucrats who sent desperation, and they exploit it. And the people who are giving their heart and their soul to entertain, they deserve more. They deserve more than what they're getting.
I couldn't have said it better myself. I want to thank you for coming on and being vulnerable, sharing your story, talking about your family and your illness, which I'll be sending you nothing but support there. And of course, I'm wishing you nothing but the best. So do me one last favor here. Tell my audience where they can find your social media, where they can find your movies, where they can find any of your writing, any of that. And we'll put links in this description as well.
Well, the social media is, I think it's official Professor _Tim_Wilson. Though it was attacked the other day, I think I've got it back.
Oh my gosh!
And then that's Instagram. It's the second time it's happened. And then YouTube is Professor Tim Wilson. If you just type in how to write a good essay, you come to me immediately. And I think I've put up links to my films there as well. And I'm going to start doing. Do you see Shakespeare behind me? I'm going to start doing some academic stuff on YouTube as well.
That's outstanding.
So YouTube will be the go-to place, I think.
All right.
I don't know whether I've got to start discovering what Patreon is, I suppose
Oh
I have
man.
really, haven't I? Yeah. But I would quite like. I think as an academic, I'm really an entertainer, and I think that's what I, in the end, I just have to embrace that reality. Um, but I would like that entertainment to be, yeah, smeared with a bit of politics and a little bit of education.
This is the intersection of everything I feel like is me and has been my life. So I completely relate to that.
No,
Yeah.
it's there, and I think reality TV lies in the heart of that.
Hmm.
So we were involved in reality TV. The reality, the people who cast us knew what they were doing.
Yeah.
I can see immediately why you were cast. You can probably see why I was cast. And we might resent the way it worked, but that's because of the evil in the system, not
It's,
because reality TV itself is essentially malign. I don't think it is. I think it could be a force for good.
I think so
It's
too.
democratized television,
Yeah.
and
I
that's what
agree.
we need to. That's what we need to make sure it is. And every other form of entertainment, the people who are entertaining are protected by unions, by agents, by this mass of individuals who support the performer because they know
Hmm.
that the production is mean
Yeah.
and always has been. We're not going to change production. We're not going to make production into a different animal. We just need to make sure
We need to regulate
that
it.
we. No, because that's the point. I don't think we can regulate it. We can do a little bit of regulation, but the main thing we have to do is to protect the performers.
Right. Well, yeah, that's what I'm thinking. That's the regulation. Like, hey, guess what? You're going to work 8 hours and then you're going to get paid double time for the next four or whatever those look like. Yeah.
Absolutely. And if you're being filmed through the night, you're going to be raking it in.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. Well, thank you again so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. And thanks to everyone for listening. And make sure that you check out the links below and check out Professor Tim. Thank you for joining us on this week's episode of Eyes Wide Open. If you enjoy the show, the best way to support us is by sharing or dropping a review. For more information and content, check out engagewithnick.com or find me on Instagram at nthompson513. Don't go through life blind. Do the work so you can show up in the world with your eyes wide open.